What's up, fight fans? Welcome back to the WAAR Room. This is Chris Baldwin, aka Fight Goddess, and I am here with Malissa Smith and Eddie Goldman. We are going to talk about the world of boxing, the world of women's boxing, because there were some fire-ass fights this past weekend. And Melissa, we're going to start off with the Baumgardner fight. I know you watched that fight. Give us the breakdown on that.
Well, first of all, it was on the zone, and it was a super featherweight, which, last week we talked about Michaela Mayer and her absolute devastating win. And now we have Terry Harper, who has the WBC belt.
She had the WBC.
Had
that belt.
And, was being touted as, the next big thing. And there was a lot of screaming and hollering because Michaela Mayer made the top 10 pound for pound on the ring rankings, and she didn't, and all this kind of stuff. Well, meanwhile, Terry Harper, if you recall, she had broken her hand, not once, broke it. She had surgery, repaired it, and then she broke it again. So like her hardware snapped on her hand. So she hadn't fought in a year when she came into the ring, and her opponent was Alicia Baumgardner, who is one tough lady.
She's the truth.
She is the truth. And her only loss had been to Christina Linaradu. Gosh, I've just completely messed up that name.
That's all right.
But
I hack up names all the time.
Anyway, who's a Greek fighter, really, really tough. And even that loss, which was for a belt, was only by split decision. So this is a tough lady. So she came into this fight saying, hey, you are underestimating me. You do not know who I am. And she came in there to win. Now, this is also a woman who's been fighting at super lightweight rather than junior lightweight. So she came down, she kind of has gone between both weights. She's fought super feather in the past. She had a baby belt in super feather, and then had gone up to super light. So she's, as with many women, you have to kind of go between weights. Anyway, so she came down her 2 weight classes to fight in this fight, and just came to win. She did not come to box. She came to win.
She looked amazing.
And she did. She had beautiful mechanics in the ring and completely flummoxed Terry Harper really from the beginning. I mean, Harper, listen, she's coming back after a year's layoff. She's coming back after having broken her hand having had 2 surgeries on her hand. So that psychologically she was coming back from a lot. But Alicia just overwhelmed her, swarmed her, gave her better mechanics, and then knocked her out with a beautiful right.
Knocked her out on her feet. She was standing up
on her feet. She just stood there, stunned. Her body went into shock. And Alicia's looking like, oh, she's not moving. So she came in to hit her again. As the ref was coming in, she did clock her a little bit, not too hard.
Right.
Because by that point, the ref had just literally encircled Terry Harper's body. It was like, no, this woman is out on her feet. And she was. Yeah. She was absolutely out on her feet. And it was one of the best stoppages I've seen in a long time. There's been disputes about coming in to stop women's fights too early. That was a great stoppage.
That was a perfect stoppage.
It was perfect, because if she had been really hit again, she would have landed hard on her head. I don't even want to think about what would have happened.
Right. I want to add on the stoppage. So I only saw clips from the fight. It was clear that Terry Harper could no longer defend herself.
Mm-hmm.
She was sort of frozen like a statue, and she kind of turned her back. And the referee in this case really had great timing. If you can't defend yourself anymore, the fight is over. And she had already been losing the fight. But once that happened, it's over. So people want to see, I don't know what they want to see, somebody beaten to death in the ring or whatever. This was a very good stoppage. And I think other referees can learn from this one in terms
Mhm.
of what to do. And if they need to have a rematch sometime in the future, I don't really know if that's going to happen, but you can always have a rematch in the future.
Yeah, I mean, there
Absolutely.
is apparently a rematch clause, but I don't know that that's going to happen. So, but the net effect is,
No, you froze up there a little bit. All
Yeah,
right.
the internet all over has just been
Yeah.
crazy. I'm hoping that I don't freeze up over here, not from being punched, but from my internet provider Spectrum punching me.
You're right. So
okay.
what does Alicia go from, where does she go from here? Like the next, what's her next step?
Well, that's a good question. With Michaela Mayer having unified with 2 belts last weekend, there's one other belt, big belt out there, which is by Choi, who's a South Korean fighter, undefeated, and a very good boxer. And I think the plan had been for Terry Harper to win this fight and then
Mhm.
fight Choi. So now with Alicia Baumgardner winning, the question will be whether they make a fight between Baumgardner and Choi to unify, and then
Right.
have that and then whoever wins that bout would face Michaela Mayer in an undisputed
Wow.
competition.
I'd
That
see
could be
that. I
that.
like to see that.
So that's one way that this can go. But we'll see. I mean, Eddie Hearn took a big hit on this because he had it all mapped out how he was going to get to undisputed. So the road to
He
undisputed.
underestimated that girl from Detroit.
Yes, he did.
Came to
And
win.
she came to win. And it's interesting. She's managed by Brian Cohn, who also manages Mary McGee, who had that big win. He also manages Callie Reese, who's fighting this weekend on her own road to undisputed in the super lightweight division against Jessica Camara this weekend in New Hampshire. So, for his outfit as a manager, wow, they've gotten
Mhm.
some big wins coming on.
That's right.
So
Good job.
that's really interesting. Good job for him and his team. So that's a big fight to look forward to. It'll be on the zone. Really, really worth seeing if you can in the United States, because the winner of that fight, whether it's Callie Reese or Jessica Camara, my money is going to be on Callie Reese just because she's been out there longer and as a stronger pedigree as a fighter. But you never know with Camara. She looked beautiful against Heather Hardy, although she had lost her previous fight against Melissa St. V. Neither of whom is like elite, but
Mhm.
well, certainly Heather Hardy was close from the old school kind of pro boxing start.
And who is Ava Cantos fighting?
I'm not sure. I don't know who
Yeah, I
she's
think
fighting.
she's on the card on the 27th,
She's
I
on the
believe.
27th, yeah. And Shalito Vincent is going to come back to the ring on the 27th, also up in Massachusetts. So the Camara Callie Reese fight will be the second half of the sort of road to undisputed, getting a unified title between those two. And then the winner of that fight will face Chantel Cameron in early winter, sometime in the winter, early
Mhm.
spring next year. So that's really, really exciting because Chantel Cameron, if you recall, 2 weeks ago, just put on a clinic in boxing. So I'm really looking forward to the Callie Reese fight and see how she's going to do. And then we'll have a really exciting thing. I mean, again, we talked about this. This is women's boxing's brilliant fall. And I've just learned that Natasha Jonas, who is an Olympian from England, is finally going to get a fight. She's going to be on a card at a Wembley this weekend in England. It'll be on Sky Sports. I haven't been able to locate who the American partner will be, but there's some really exciting stuff happening in women's boxing. Never mind what's going on in Mexico and Argentina.
All right.
So
And
really good
Clarissa
stuff.
signing, did she sign a
A
big deal?
multi-million. She signed a 7-figure deal. She's gotten her $1 million. I mean, for 2 fights. Don't know what the actual price is per
Right.
fight, but good for her.
Good for
Good
her.
on her. That
Right.
also is with Sky Sports Boxer. We're still waiting to find out who the American partner will be on those whether streaming or televised. And still haven't heard on that. I mean, Sky Sports really has to find an American partner. Right now, they've been using, I think it's Fight TV or something, but it's
Fight
it's
TV.
Fight TV, but it's been a per fight cost of like $20, and that's just too much. That's like pay-per-view almost. So
Right.
they've got to come up with some kind of partnership. I know Eddie had talked about that, about the relationship with Comcast and all of that, but we'll see what flies out. And they don't have a lot of time because Clarissa fights on December, what was it, 11th?
11th.
11th. So as does Savannah Marshall. So we really got to get something quick because that's coming up fast.
Yeah, and if they don't get an American TV deal, it just shows again how all the idiocy of being divided up by different promoters and different networks and all this is further leading to a decline of boxing in the United States. Well, you're seeing a lot of these fights taking place in the UK where it'll get a lot of coverage in the media. It'll be on one or another of these different networks, even when it's on their pay-per-view there. It's not $70 or $80 like it is in the United States. It'll usually cost roughly, at max will be 25 pounds, which is 30 something dollars. So it's much more affordable over there. And meanwhile, the American networks, everybody's dithering, getting a lot of low ratings, and bad reviews. And so particularly American boxing is declining. And I think the zone is pretty much written off making America a big home for boxing and investing a lot of money. They don't have Canelo anymore. They may get him on a fight-by-fight basis in the future. They may or may not have Joshua anymore. They certainly don't have him. If he fights Usyk in the UK, that'll probably either be on a pay-per-view, either by Sky or DAZN or somebody. Not Eddie Hearn said not part of the regular DAZN subscription. So a lot of people signed up for DAZN, at least here. They expected to get Joshua and Canelo, some of the top fighters, and now they're not getting them anymore. So
they did a little bait and switch.
Yeah, they'll get Andre this weekend. You know, he's on that card. But you know, the other thing, just one other thing about women's boxing in UK, there's actually a women in boxing conference being sponsored in England, and Natasha Jonas is going to be a prime speaker in December 18th, and that's a big, huge deal. And there's a lot of publicity around that. And now that she's with Sky Sports and Boxer, they're really putting a lot of promotion around that. Eddie Hearn is putting a lot of promotion around that. So women's boxing is really heating up in the UK. They're getting a lot of fans, and they fill stadiums with a lot of fannies in the seats. I mean, there was that issue with Chantel Cameron's fight where, you know, she became the main event. There was a lot of pushback on that, but it still looked good. And DAZN, you know, had a card this weekend in Anaheim. They have a deal with Golden Boy, and they had a card this weekend. And they had a really competitive fight between Mancino and Calvi, which was the main event of their streaming on the Golden Boy side. But that was a good card. So, you know, they are making investment in terms of continuing to do fights in the United States, and they're putting women on every card that they can, which is more than, you know, you can say about PBC, which does zero.
Right, exactly. Nothing. None of those guys put women's fighters on their cards. Exactly. All right, let's talk.
Yep.
All right, let's get into that Benavidez fight. Kyron, you know, Kyron Jackson, hey, he hung in there. What's his last name? Kyron
Davis.
He hung in there with Benavidez. I have to give it to him. He was a warrior, but they should have stopped that fight at the end of round 6. He should not have come back out there for round 7.
He wanted to, and his trainer, Stephen Edwards, said, look, I'm going to give you at most one more round. I don't want to let you get really badly hurt in it. He wanted to go out for the 7th round. and he let him. It was on Showtime. I don't know how many people watched. We'll find out how many people saw it. And of course, now these networks, particularly since boxing is getting terrible ratings, they're putting up a lot of highlights on social media. So many people could say, yeah, I've seen that fight or part of the fight by just following the social media accounts of the promoters and the networks, not to mention people who just put it up on YouTube on their own. But what was interesting when the fight started, right in the beginning, Davis just was running around the ring trying to avoid Benavidez.
He
And
should have
after a
did that the
little
whole
bit of
time.
that, they engaged. Well, I don't think Benavidez would allow him to do that.
Right.
So they had a real firefight. And again, Davis, you got to understand, he was a late replacement. He's supposed to be Uzcategui fighting Benavidez, which probably would have been a little bit more of a competitive fight. But Uzcategui failed a drug test. He tested positive for a thing called REPO, recombinant erythropoietin, which I'm probably mispronouncing. It's a synthetic version of EPO, and
What?
that's banned. Yeah, so he was off the card. So they had to find a late replacement for the main event of the Showtime card. And they brought in Davis, who's been training with Terrence Crawford, who's really a middleweight, against Benavidez, a big super middleweight.
He looked
who
huge
just
against
about,
Davis.
yeah, and everybody, just about everybody who does rankings has Benavidez. This is even before the Canelo Plant. They had him ranked ahead of Plant, only behind Canelo in that division. So you're fighting a top level fighter who's never lost, by the way. He's lost the WBC belt twice, but not because he lost it in the ring. He lost it because of drugs, and he lost it because he didn't make weight, and he lost it on the scales. And of course, he wants to fight Canelo now. So it was a real daunting task for Davis to take that fight. But what he did in that fight, knowing all this, he's fighting above his weight class against a tremendous undefeated fighter, a late replacement. He established himself as an exciting fighter, and he should be able to get some more televised fights out of this. I don't know how far he's really going to go, but I think that was really his objective, because I think deep down they knew they had almost no chance of winning this fight. And for Benavidez, he made the statement. He had this big firefight with Davis, which of course he came out very much on top. And Showtime put this on a week after the Canelo Plant. They showed the replay of that fight at the beginning of the telecast. And when they repeat it, or if you watch it online, if you subscribe to Showtime, all of that is together on the telecast. So the idea was to build up to a fight between Benavidez and Canelo, with Benavidez being, again, the top super middleweight behind Canelo. We'll see whether Canelo really wants to do that. I think it'll be a much tougher fight for Canelo than Caleb Plant was, but it's the fight that a lot of people really going to want to see. We'll see how that, it's boxing, so we'll see how all that works out. And Benavidez has to keep up the discipline. There was an issue made about his weight, but the contracted weight for this fight was 169, and he came in exactly at that, even though super middleweight is 168. It was not a title fight. It was a 10-round fight. But if he fights for a title at super middleweight, he cannot be over 168. There's no allowance in boxing in a title fight. So he has to keep disciplined. And, he's only 24. He's young. So hopefully he's worked out these problems that he's had, and he can stay disciplined. And perhaps in 2022, I'd like to see Canelo fight Golovkin. I think that would be the big money fight, and then fight Benavidez. I think that would be awesome for some big, they could be two of the biggest fights in 2022, because with the heavyweights, who knows what these guys are going to do.
These guys aren't even fighting. When was the last heavyweight fight? That was Usyk,
Well,
right?
Yeah,
No,
and
Fury.
then Fury
Fury's
against
fight.
Wilder, October
Fury
9th. They're
Wilder.
supposed to, by the time this is posted, the media reports are that the WBC will order Fury to face Dillian White, who's been their #1 contender now for a couple of years without getting a title shot. And the negotiations, according to both the promoters of Usyk and Joshua, are going on now for them to fight perhaps in March or April of next year, and the Fury fight possibly in April of next year. But again, it's boxing. Who knows if all this is going to work out? And again, the big promise, I'm writing something up about this, the big Carnival Barker promise is, step right up. They're going to watch these fights, because after this, you can have the unification fight. Well, we've been hearing that for several years now, and we'll see whether that happens. But I wouldn't even bet a used tissue on it happening in 2022. And I have a
Yeah.
lot of used tissues these days.
Yeah, I think Canelo just fights twice next year. I don't think he does that. He fought 4 times this year, I mean.
4 times in the last 12 months.
Right, yeah, so I think
Incredible
he'll
run. He
fight
beat-
twice, next year.
He beat 3 undefeated champions. He was 4-0 with 3 knockouts. He beat Callum Smith, who won the World Boxing Super Series at super middleweight. He destroyed Billy Joe Saunders. We don't even know if he's going to fight again after the beatdown that he took. And of course, Caleb Plant, who had never been knocked down before. So he said he wanted to take some, and he had like the Yildirim fight in between that.
Mhm.
We'll see what he wants to do.
Well,
He's
next
clearly
week,
fighter of the year.
yeah, well, definitely, without a doubt, and his trainer gets trainer of the year. But next week, look, I'm gonna have my fighter Tamis Long, who said that Caleb Plant outboxed Canelo, like he said had Canelo not knocked out Plant would have won that fight. So Tam, you and I are gonna have a big discussion about Canelo's skills versus Caleb Plant's skills, because yes, Caleb, he can box, but he did not win the majority of those rounds. I know that after watching the fight a second time. And I can't believe Showtime showed that fight for free after I paid my $80, Steven Espinoza. Shit. They showed that fight for free. All right.
That's what they generally do. HBO used to do that. They generally have done that with the pay-per-views. It's going to be on the next week. It's just by that time you'll know the outcome.
All right. Well, it was fun
It's
watching.
another example of the
Watching
pay-per-view
live.
model. So
Right. All right.
So
You guys got
stupid.
anything else for us? What's up? Anything else you want to
yeah,
cover,
yeah,
Eddie?
we have
We got Crawford,
Terrence-
right?
Terrence Crawford versus Sean Porter is coming up, which again, it's interesting, the politics in there. Terrence Crawford and a lot of other people have been saying, look, he is really the pound for pound top fighter in the world, but he hasn't been getting the exposure and the top fights and the attention that Canelo has. Now you can debate that point, and he wants to prove it against Sean Porter and unify in the welterweight division. And so this is a chance to do it. And there are a couple of things that are interesting about this. The reason he hasn't fights is not because he's been ducking them. It's that PBC has been protecting all their top welterweights like Errol Spence and others. But now they're working with Top Rank to put on this fight. And there's some, when I listened to the conference call that they had with Crawford, and Bob Arum was on it. And Bob Arum, who, as we know, is one of the nastiest haters in the world, was gushing about working with PBC and how wonderful they are, and ESPN and all this. And I wonder, because PBC's ratings have been so dreadful on Fox, they're on lower level fights on the main Fox broadcast network and prime time on a Saturday night, getting awful ratings. And it's said that their contract with Fox is coming up, is ending soon. I wonder if they might be moving their shell game next to ESPN Plus to add more boxing, because ESPN Plus has been growing in the number of subscribers. So I wonder if the next destination is going to be. And in that case, you remove the political problem of having Crawford face Spence, assuming Spence can even fight again, because Spence pulled out of the Pacquiao fight with an eye injury. He, of course, previously had been in that car crash. We don't know what condition he's in. Keith Thurman has repeatedly been injured. So a lot of these top welterweights that PBC had aren't fighting, aren't bringing in money or attention for them. And maybe they're saying,
Right.
maybe we should get out of the welterweight business. But the problem for Crawford, if you want to see the media conference call that Top Rank had with Terrence Crawford, you can go on YouTube and look it up and catch the replay. And what was interesting about that was they were supposed to do it one day last week, and they couldn't, because they couldn't get a good connection with Crawford. So they postponed it to the next day. And when they postponed it to the next day, Crawford is sitting in a car talking over, presumably a cell phone that kept cutting in and cutting out. So ESPN didn't even send somebody over to really to put him in a studio somewhere or
Right.
set this up to promote the fight. And if you read the comments, some of them were funny. They said it looked like a school board Zoom meeting or something like that. It's communication with Terrence Crawford is the problem. They have to work on the communication, and that's not the fighter's fault. It's his manager's, promoter and manager's fault, that they have to improve his communication. So if he has a big performance against Porter, who we know is a swarmer, is a very difficult fighter, that could set him up eventually for a fight with Errol Spence, which could be a huge fight in 2022. But again, it's boxing. So, what makes sense often is not done, and often they end up doing the wrong
Right.
thing. So see what, and again, this is on pay-per-view 2 weeks after the Canelo Plant fight. You have this one for $70 instead of $80. I don't know how well this is going to do. So we'll see what happens.
All right. Well, I don't know what the hell is going to happen other than Terrence Crawford is probably going to knock Sean Porter out. All right, you guys, anything else you guys want to cover?
Good.
What, Eddie?
I think that's about it. There's just a lot going on, but the future of boxing, particularly in the United States, is not bright with this and
Right.
all of these other problems. Because when we talk about all these UK fights and Sky Sports and all that, and the expansion of Pro Bellum and all these local promoters, we know standing in the shadows in Dubai is one Mr. Daniel Kinahan.
Yep.
So that's a problem that's only going to get worse, it looks like.
Yeah, and you're watching fighters and you suddenly spy on their boxing shorts or skirts, gladiator things or whatever the heck they wear in the ring. You see the little MTK
Right.
global logo all over the place. It's like, what?
Exactly.
They're an MTK
Yeah,
fighter?
he's staying pretty low. I haven't heard anything on him.
Yeah,
Yep.
no, pretty low for him. But
That's right.
It's interesting because the infiltration on the British side is pretty huge, but it's
Right.
also, you got MTK on the American fighters too. Crawford.
Slowly
So-
but surely,
Slowly
exactly.
but surely. So I'm curious to see what this is all going to look like. I mean, the DS fight coming up in December. He's an MTK fighter now. So how that infiltration is going to seep into American boxing and what it's going to mean in terms of promotion and in terms of sort of how boxing is viewed, how we stream it, how we watch it, whether it's on old traditional TV, whether it's on traditional cable, whether it's through whether it's DAZN or ESPN, or maybe some new entity we don't even know about yet, because, you know, as we were saying earlier, Sky Sports doesn't have a US partner. Are they going to expand? Are they going to set up something new? Their boxer promotional brand is sort of tied into MTK to some degree. We don't really know what that's going to look like, and we don't know how it's going to affect the face of boxing as we come into 2022, and how boxing is viewed in the United States in terms of the packaging of it as an entertainment product through various media outlets.
Right. Well, you guys stay tuned. That's all for us today. If you want more in-depth coverage on women's boxing, because we cover a lot of women's boxing here, and corruption in the sport or sports governance in general, then please subscribe, like this channel, check us out at warsports.com. That's WAARSPORTS.com. You guys, Eddie, you want to tell the people where they can find you?
Yes, mainly on Twitter at NHB News. And you could go to my website, eddiegoldman.com, and my Patreon page, subscribe to that. A lot of exclusive articles and analysis at patreon.com/Eddie Goldman. And I'm coming up with a new line of no holds barred with Eddie Goldman schmatters on
That's
my
right.
Redbubble page, which you can help support independent journalism with that. And I know, thank you, Chris, for helping with the
No problem.
design, because I'm not exactly good at that.
Yeah, no worries. All right, Melissa, tell everybody where they can find you.
Okay, I'm at Girl Boxing Now on Twitter and on Instagram, and my website is girlboxing.org. And we're just wishing everybody a lot of peace and health and everything else.
That's right.
Enjoy the boxing this weekend. It is going to be hot.
That's right. You guys stay tuned. Next week, we'll be back. I am your fight goddess. You can find me on Instagram at La Fight Goddess. And I'm on Twitter at Angry Afro Radio. All right. So you guys have a great day. Peace. We're out.